Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, watching the stars drift past the main view screen of the UES horizon. The exploration ship had been on patrol for 3 months now, mapping new systems at the edge of human space. It was quiet work, but Jake preferred it that way. After 20 years in the fleet, he had seen enough action to last a lifetime. The bridge was calm that morning. His science officer, Dr. Lisa Campbell, worked at her station, cataloging mineral readings from the last asteroid field they had surveyed. At the communications console, Lieutenant Ben Walsh monitored the usual chatter from nearby shipping lanes. Everything seemed normal. Then the alarms started blaring. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal," Walsh called out, his fingers dancing over his controls. "It's coming from the HFY system, about 12 light years from here." Jake frowned. The HFY system was Valari space, and the Valari had made it very clear that humans were not welcome there. They were one of the most advanced races in the galaxy, with technology that made human ships look like toys. They had beautiful cities floating in their ocean worlds and weapons that could slice through asteroids like butter. They also thought humans were primitives who had no business traveling among the stars. "Are you sure it's a distress signal?" Jake asked. "The Valari don't usually ask for help, especially not from us." Walsh checked his readings again. "Yes, sir. It's definitely a distress call. And Captain, it's directed specifically at any human vessels in the area." Dr. Campbell looked up from her station. "That's strange. The Valari have never even acknowledged our diplomatic messages before." Jake stood up from his chair. The Valari were proud people who lived in underwater cities on their ocean worlds. They had been part of the Galactic Council for over 1,000 years, while humans had only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. In all that time, they had treated humanity like annoying children who should stay in their own backyard. "Put the signal through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a being unlike any human. Ambassador Zephlin of the Valari Republic appeared before them. Her skin was a pale blue-green color that shimmered, like scales, and she had large, dark eyes that seemed to hold depths like the ocean itself. Gill slits along her neck fluttered as she breathed, and her long fingers ended in webbed tips. But what struck Jake most was the fear in her eyes. "Human vessel," Zephlin began, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Valari possessed. "I am Ambassador Zephlin of the Valari Republic. I speak for my people in this darkest hour." She paused, and Jake could see how much the next words cost her. "We need your help." Dr. Campbell stepped closer to Jake's chair. "Sir, the Valari have never asked anyone for help before. Their military is supposed to be one of the strongest in the galaxy." On the screen, Zephlin continued, "6 months ago, our outer colonies detected something approaching from the dark space between galaxies. We thought it was just an asteroid cluster at first. We were wrong." Her voice shook slightly. "They call themselves the Krexthul Swarm, and they are unlike anything we have ever faced." Jake had heard whispers about the swarm in the outer systems, shipping lanes going silent, colonies losing contact, but nobody had solid information. The Galactic Council had been unusually quiet about it all. "The swarm consumes everything," Zephlin went on. "They eat the plants, the animals, even the soil itself. They use it all to make more of themselves. Our colony of New Tidal had 12 million inhabitants. When we lost contact with them, we sent a fleet to investigate." She closed her large eyes for a moment. "We found nothing but dead rock and millions of insect-like creatures building ships from the bones of our people." The bridge of the horizon fell silent. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Our military fought them at the Coral Garden system," the ambassador continued. "We had 50 ships, the finest in our fleet. The swarm had hundreds of bioships, creatures the size of our largest vessels but alive and growing. We destroyed many of them, but for every one we killed, 2 more seemed to take its place." Her voice grew quieter. "Of our 50 ships, only 3 escaped." Dr. Campbell moved to her console and began pulling up what little data they had on the Valari military. Jake knew what she would find. The Valari had plasma weapons that could burn through any armor humans had ever developed. Their shields could stop anything short of a direct hit from a nuclear weapon. Their ships were fast, elegant, and deadly. If the Volari couldn't stop this swarm, what hope did anyone have? We tried everything, Zeppelin said. We adapted our weapons, changed our tactics, called in favors from our allies. Nothing worked. The swarm learns from every battle. They take our weapons and somehow make them part of themselves. They study our tactics and find ways to counter them. She looked directly at Jake through the screen. In 6 months, they have reduced our population from 12 billion to fewer than 3 billion. Jake felt his stomach drop. The Volari were being wiped out. Why are you calling us? He asked. Why humans? Zephelin's expression showed how difficult this was for her. Because you come from what the galaxy calls a death world. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet, so dangerous that most species would die within hours of landing there. The gravity alone would crush a Volari, and your weather patterns would kill us in minutes. She paused, gathering herself. We have heard stories about human military actions. How you fight in conditions that would kill our soldiers. How you never give up even when defeat seems certain. We always thought these were just stories. Exaggerations meant to make your species seem more impressive than it really was. Dr. Campbell looked at Jake with raised eyebrows. The reputation of human stubbornness was apparently spreading. We were wrong, Zeppelin admitted. We need that stubborn refusal to quit. We need soldiers who can think for themselves instead of following predetermined patterns. We need people who grew up on a world that tried to kill them every day and somehow thrived anyway. The ambassador leaned forward and Jake could see the desperation in her alien features. The swarm will not stop with us. Once they finish consuming our worlds, they will move on to the next system and the next. Eventually, they will reach Earth. We can offer you our star charts, our technology, access to weapons and shields beyond anything your people have ever seen. She took a shaking breath. In return, we ask only that you help us fight. Help us save what remains of our people. Show us how Deathworlders wage war. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake stared at the empty screen for a long moment. The Volari, who had refused to even speak to human diplomats, were now begging for help. An entire civilization was being eaten alive by something from the dark between stars. Orders, Captain? Walsh asked quietly. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. Dr. Campbell was already pulling up tactical reports. Walsh had started preparing a message to Fleet Command. These people trusted him to make the right choice. Set course for Earth, Jake ordered. Maximum speed. And send a priority message to Admiral Clark. Tell her the Volari Republic has formally requested military assistance against an existential threat. As the horizon turned toward home, Jake wondered if humanity was about to bite off more than it could chew. The Volari were one of the most advanced species in the galaxy, and they were losing badly. But then again, humans had always been good at fighting impossible odds. Admiral Susan Clark stood in the war room of Luna Station, studying the holographic display that showed the Volari Republic's territory. Red zones marked where the swarm had already consumed entire worlds. Yellow areas showed systems under attack. The few remaining blue zones represented what was left of Volari space. It wasn't much. How long do we have? She asked Captain Jake Morrison, who had arrived just hours ago with the Volari's plea for help. According to Ambassador Zeppelin, maybe 6 weeks before their last major world falls, Jake replied. After that, the swarm will have enough resources to spread in all directions at once. Admiral Pete Jackson entered the room, followed by Dr. Lisa Campbell and Colonel Ryan Hughes. Jackson commanded the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, 50 of humanity's best warships, including his flagship, the UES Independence. Hughes led the Marine forces that would be needed for any ground operations. I've reviewed the tactical data the Volari sent us, Jackson said, activating his personal display. Their weapons are definitely superior to ours. Plasma cannons that can melt through our best armor, shields that can stop direct nuclear hits. But they're still losing. Dr. Campbell stepped forward with her analysis pad. I've been studying the biological samples the Volari managed to collect from destroyed swarm creatures. What we're dealing with is unlike anything in our databases. She activated the holographic projector, showing a three-dimensional image of what looked like a giant insect crossed with a machine. The creature was the size of a small car, with 6 legs ending in sharp claws, mandibles that could probably bite through steel, and what appeared to be organic weapons growing from its back. "This is a basic swarm warrior," Campbell explained. "But here's the terrifying part. Every single one of these creatures is connected to every other one through some kind of biological network. They don't think as individuals. They think as one massive mind." Colonel Hughes frowned at the image. "How do you fight something that shares all its knowledge instantly?" "That's exactly the problem the Valari are having," Campbell continued. "Every time they develop a new tactic, the swarm learns about it immediately and adapts. Every weapon frequency they use gets countered within hours. The swarm takes their dead and studies them, then builds immunities into the next generation." "Admiral," Clark turned to Jackson. "What about their ships?" "That's where it gets really nasty," Jackson replied, bringing up images of swarm vessels. "These aren't built ships. They're grown. Living creatures the size of battleships with weapons that are part of their biology. They can heal damage, adapt to new threats, and they reproduce by consuming the materials from planets they conquer." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. "Admiral," Jake said quietly, "there's something else. The Valari want to establish a joint command structure. They're sending Admiral Quindar to coordinate with us." 2 days later, the Valari delegation arrived at Luna Station. Admiral Quindar was tall for a Valari, nearly 6 feet, with the same blue-green skin and large dark eyes as Ambassador Zephlin. His movements were fluid and graceful, like he was swimming through water even in the air. The first joint planning session did not go well. "Your tactical approach is too aggressive," Quindar said, studying the human battle plans. "You propose to engage the swarm directly in open space. This is exactly what they want. They will overwhelm you with numbers." Admiral Jackson leaned back in his chair. "And your approach is too defensive. You keep falling back, giving them more territory to consume. Every world they take makes them stronger." "We fall back to preserve our forces for the next engagement," Quindar replied with the patience of someone explaining something to a child. "It is basic military strategy." "Basic strategy doesn't work against an enemy that learns from every encounter," Colonel Hughes interjected. "They've already figured out your retreat patterns. They're probably 3 steps ahead of your next withdrawal." The Valari Admiral's gill slits fluttered with what Jake was beginning to recognize as irritation. "Humans fight like wild animals. You charge forward without proper planning or coordination. This is why your species is not yet ready for membership in the Galactic Council." The tension in the room could be cut with a knife. Dr. Campbell quickly stepped in before things got worse. "Maybe we should look at some actual combat footage," she suggested. "It might help us understand what we're really dealing with." The holographic display showed a recording from the Battle of Coral Gardens, where the Valari had lost 47 ships. Jake watched as elegant Valari vessels moved in perfect formation, their plasma weapons lighting up space in brilliant displays of coordinated firepower. The swarm ships that emerged from hyperspace were nightmares made real, living vessels that looked like enormous insects, their hulls pulsing with organic life. Weapons that were clearly part of their biology fired streams of acid and swarms of smaller creatures that attached themselves to Valari ships like parasites. "Watch their tactics," Admiral Quindar said. "See how they coordinate their attack." Jake studied the recording carefully. The swarm moved like a single organism, which made sense if they shared a collective mind. But there was something else. They're not just coordinated, he realized. They're predictable. Every move follows a pattern. "What do you mean?" Jackson asked. "Look at how they respond to the Valari formations. It's always the same. When the Valari ships form a defensive line, the swarm always flanks from the left. When they concentrate fire on a single target, the swarm always responds by swarming that exact position." Dr. Campbell rewound the footage and played it again. "Jake's right. Their responses are too perfect, too uniform. It's like they're following a program." Quindar looked puzzled. "Is this not how proper military tactics work? You analyze the enemy formation and respond with the most effective counter strategy. Not if you're fighting humans." Colonel Hughes said with a grim smile. We specialize in doing exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right time. The next test came sooner than expected. A Valari colony ship carrying refugees from the outer systems sent a distress call. They were under attack by a small swarm patrol, just 3 bioships against the colony vessel's minimal defenses. This is our chance to observe swarm tactics in real time, Admiral Clark decided. She ordered the destroyer UES Valor, commanded by Captain Steve Rogers, to respond to the distress call. The Valor was not humanity's most advanced ship, but Captain Rogers and his crew had seen action in the border conflicts with pirates. They knew how to fight dirty. Jake and the Joint Command staff watched the engagement through real-time transmissions. The swarm bioships moved to intercept the Valor exactly as predicted, using the same flanking maneuver they had employed against Valari vessels. But Rogers didn't follow standard fleet tactics. Instead of forming a defensive line, he ordered his ship to accelerate directly at the largest swarm vessel while firing everything he had. At the last second, he spun the Valor 90 degrees and fired his main engines, using the exhaust as a weapon while simultaneously launching a spread of nuclear torpedoes. The swarm ships tried to adapt to this maneuver, but it was unlike anything in their experience. One bioship took the full force of the engine exhaust and nuclear detonation, its organic hull burning away in sections. The other 2 tried to coordinate a response, but Rogers was already moving again, using debris from the damaged ship as cover, while his crew fired from unexpected angles. Impossible, Admiral Quindar whispered. His tactical approach makes no sense. How can he maintain fire control while maneuvering so erratically? Practice, Colonel Hughes replied. Human ship crews train for situations where everything goes wrong and they have to improvise. We're good at making it up as we go. The engagement lasted only 12 minutes. When it was over, all 3 swarm bioships were destroyed, and the Valor had taken only minor damage. The colony ship and its 1,000 refugees were safe, but more importantly, they had learned something crucial about their enemy. The swarm couldn't adapt fast enough to unconventional tactics, Dr. Campbell observed. Their collective intelligence is incredibly efficient, but it needs predictable patterns to work with. Admiral Clark studied the tactical readouts. So our best weapon against a perfect collective mind is chaos. Controlled chaos, Admiral Jackson corrected. We need to be unpredictable without being stupid about it. Quindar looked at the human officers with what might have been the beginning of respect. Your Captain Rogers violated 17 principles of proper fleet engagement. By all tactical theory, he should have been destroyed. Tactical theory is just guidelines, Jake replied. Sometimes you have to throw the book away and trust your instincts. Instincts, the Valari Admiral repeated slowly, as if the word was foreign to him. We do not train our commanders to rely on instincts. We train them to follow proven strategies. And that's exactly why the swarm is beating you, Colonel Hughes said bluntly. They've learned all your proven strategies. Every time you do what you're supposed to do, they know exactly how to counter it. As the meeting broke up, Jake could see that something had changed in Admiral Quindar's expression. The Valari was beginning to understand that humanity's apparent primitiveness might actually be their greatest strength. General Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Independence, watching the tactical display show the Cerulean system. 3 weeks had passed since the joint human-Valari fleet had arrived in what remained of Valari space. In that time, they had fought 6 small engagements against swarm patrol groups, winning each one but learning something disturbing with every victory. The swarm was getting smarter. They're adapting faster than we expected, Admiral Pete Jackson said, reviewing the latest battle reports. That last group of bioships tried to copy Captain Rogers' spinning maneuver from our first fight. Dr. Lisa Campbell looked up from her analysis station. The good news is they're not very good at copying human tactics. They can mimic the movements, but they don't understand the reasoning behind them. Colonel Nina Brooks, Turner's second in command, pointed at the display showing the Cerulean system's third moon. That's where we test whether they can adapt to something completely new. Intelligence says there are about 50,000 swarm creatures on that moon, turning it into a breeding ground. The moon had once been a Volari mining facility with underground tunnels and processing plants. Now it was something else entirely. The swarm had consumed everything organic on the surface and begun reshaping the underground facilities into a massive hive complex. Standard orbital bombardment won't work, Turner explained to Admiral Quindar, who was observing the planning session. The tunnels go too deep, and the swarm has grown some kind of organic armor over the surface. We need boots on the ground. The Volari Admiral's gill slits fluttered with concern. Ground combat against the swarm has never been successful. They breed too quickly, and their warriors are perfectly adapted for close combat. Our ground forces were wiped out in the first encounters. That's because your people aren't designed for ground combat in hostile environments, Colonel Brooks replied. No offense, but you're ocean dwellers. You need water to breathe properly, and your bones are too light for heavy gravity combat. She activated a holographic display showing human marine armor. Our power suits are designed for combat on worlds that would kill most species just by existing. We've fought in volcanic regions, Arctic wastelands, and toxic swamps. This hive might be hostile, but it's not worse than some of the places we've trained. Master Chief Tony Rivera stepped forward. Rivera was a legend among human marines, a man who had survived more impossible situations than anyone had a right to. His scarred face and calm demeanor commanded respect from everyone in the room. General, I've studied the hive layout from our probe data, he said. The swarm has turned those mining tunnels into a maze, but they've made a mistake. They've followed the original tunnel patterns instead of creating something new. What's the significance of that? Admiral Jackson asked. Human miners built those tunnels, Rivera explained. That means they were designed for human-sized equipment and human work patterns. We know how to fight in spaces like that. The swarm creatures are bigger than us, which means they'll have trouble maneuvering in tight spaces. Turner nodded. We're going to do something the swarm won't expect. Instead of trying to match their numbers, we're going to use the environment against them. The assault began at dawn on the moon's artificial day cycle. 12 dropships carried 300 Marines down to the surface while the fleet maintained orbit, ready to provide fire support. Colonel Brooks led the first wave, her Marines equipped with the latest Mark 7 power armor. The landing was worse than anyone had expected. The moment the dropships touched down, the ground itself seemed to come alive. What they had thought was rock and metal turned out to be living tissue, and swarm warriors erupted from hidden openings all around the landing zone. Contact, Brooks shouted over the communication system. We've got hundreds of them coming, from all directions. The Marines found themselves in exactly the kind of fight they had trained for their entire careers. Close quarters combat in a hostile environment against an enemy that wanted to tear them apart. The difference was that they were designed for this kind of nightmare. Sergeant Kelly Foster led her squad through a tunnel that pulsed with organic growths. The walls were covered in some kind of resin that the swarm had secreted, and strange lights glowed from bioluminescent patches. It was like fighting inside the belly of a giant beast. Movement ahead, reported Corporal Dan Miller, his rifle trained on a junction where 4 tunnels met. I count at least 20 contacts, maybe more. The swarm warriors that charged them were exactly as terrifying as the intelligence reports had suggested. Each one was the size of a small car, with razor-sharp claws and mandibles that could bite through steel. Their organic armor gleamed with a metallic sheen, and weapons that were part of their biology fired streams of acid and explosive organic projectiles. But the Marines were ready for them. Foster's squad opened fire with weapons designed to work in the worst possible conditions. Their armor's targeting systems tracked multiple enemies at once, and their training kicked in automatically. They moved as a unit, covering each other's blind spots and using the tunnel walls as cover. These things are tough, but they're not invincible, Foster reported as her squad advanced through the junction. Standard armor-piercing rounds work fine if you hit them in the right spots. Meanwhile, Master Chief Rivera was leading a different kind of mission deeper in the hive. His team had found what appeared to be a control center, a chamber where larger swarm creatures were coordinating the hive's defenses. This is interesting, he said, studying the biomechanical interfaces that covered the walls. Dr. Campbell was right about them being connected. Look at this. The control creatures were plugged directly into the hive's organic network. Their nervous systems merged with the living walls. Information flowed between them in patterns of light that pulsed through veins in the ceiling. If we can disrupt this, Rivera realized, we might be able to cut off their coordination. He signaled his demolitions expert, Corporal Amy Walsh. Can you rig something to take out these control nodes without bringing the whole tunnel down on us? Give me 5 minutes, Walsh replied, already unpacking her equipment. Back on the surface, Colonel Brooks was dealing with a new problem. The swarm had adapted to their initial tactics and was sending wave after wave of warriors against the Marine positions. But instead of panicking, Brooks did something that only a human commander would think of. All units, fall back to secondary positions, she ordered, and activate the environmental suits. The Marines retreated to positions they had prepared earlier, sealed areas with independent air supplies. Then Brooks gave an order that would have horrified any other species in the galaxy. Vent the atmosphere in sectors 7 through 12. The Moon's artificial atmosphere, maintained by the old mining equipment, was suddenly released into space. The swarm warriors, adapted for standard atmospheric conditions, found themselves struggling to breathe. Some of them could survive in vacuum for short periods, but they were weakened and disoriented. Now hit them with everything we've got, Brooks commanded. The Marines opened fire from their sealed positions, cutting down swarm warriors who were too busy trying to breathe to fight effectively. It was brutal, efficient, and completely ruthless. Underground, Rivera's team had successfully destroyed the control center. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Swarm creatures throughout the hive began moving in random patterns, their coordination broken. This is what happens when you cut off a collective mind, Dr. Campbell observed from the ship above. They don't know how to function as individuals. The battle for the Moon lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the swarm hive was completely destroyed, and the Marines had suffered only 12 casualties. By any measure, it was a stunning victory. But the real victory was psychological. Admiral Quindar stared at the after-action reports in disbelief. You fought them in conditions that would kill most galactic species, used the environment as a weapon, and turned their greatest strength into a weakness. General Turner nodded. That's what Deathworld survivors do. We adapt to impossible conditions and find ways to make them work for us instead of against us. Your Marines sealed themselves in and vented the atmosphere of an entire facility, the Valari Admiral said. The risk of equipment failure, of being trapped, was acceptable compared to the tactical advantage, Colonel Brooks replied. We train for situations where everything goes wrong. Fighting in vacuum is just another day at the office for us. Captain Jake Morrison, who had observed the entire operation, understood what they had accomplished. We've shown the swarm something they've never seen before. An enemy that thrives in conditions that would destroy their forces. Dr. Campbell was already analyzing the biological samples they had recovered from the hive. The swarm creatures are perfectly adapted for standard galactic environments, but they struggle with extremes: high radiation, toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures. They can adapt to these conditions, but it takes time. Time we won't give them, Turner said grimly. We're going to hit them everywhere at once in every environment they're not prepared for. Make them adapt to so many different conditions that their collective mind overloads trying to keep up. Admiral Susan Clark stood before the largest holographic display she had ever seen, showing the swarm's primary hive world. The planet was a nightmare of organic growth and mechanical precision, where 3 conquered civilizations had been consumed and transformed into a living factory for producing more swarm creatures. Intelligence estimates there are over 10 million swarm warriors on that world, General Alex Turner reported, plus countless breeding chambers, bioship construction, facilities, and command organisms we've never seen before. The war room aboard Luna Station buzzed with activity as officers from both human and Valari fleets prepared for what everyone knew would be the final battle. 3 months had passed since the assault on the Cerulean moon, and human forces had won 17 major engagements against the swarm. But this would be different. Admiral Pete Jackson pointed to the tactical display. The good news is that we've forced them to concentrate their forces. Every victory we've won has driven swarm survivors back to this central world. The bad news is that means we're facing everything they have left in one place. Captain Jake. Morrison had been promoted to admiral after his successful coordination of the mixed human-Valari squadrons. He studied the orbital defenses surrounding the hive world with growing concern. Those aren't ships, he realized. Those are living space stations. They've grown orbital fortresses out of the bones of consumed worlds. Dr. Lisa Campbell, now chief science advisor to the Joint Fleet, activated her analysis display. The entire planet has been transformed into a single organism. The surface, the atmosphere, even the orbital structures are all connected through a biological network. We're not just attacking a world. We're attacking a living creature the size of a planet. Admiral Quindar, who had become an unexpected ally and friend to the human commanders, studied the readings with his large dark eyes. In 3,000 years of Valari military history, we have never attempted to assault anything like this. That's because sane people don't usually attack planets that can fight back, Colonel Ryan Hughes replied. He had been put in charge of the ground assault forces, 3 full Marine divisions supported by Valari technology and human tactics. General Turner outlined the battle plan to the assembled commanders. We'll hit them with 3 simultaneous attacks. Admiral Jackson will lead the orbital assault with the combined fleet. Admiral Morrison will take a strike force to eliminate the command centers we've identified in the planet's core. Colonel Hughes will lead the ground assault to secure landing zones and disable the surface defenses. It was an ambitious plan that required perfect timing and coordination between forces that had been enemies just months before. But the alternative was watching the swarm recover and continue consuming the galaxy. The assault began with Admiral Jackson's fleet dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 130 ships, human and Valari working together, faced off against orbital defenses that defied imagination. Living fortresses the size of moons opened fire with weapons that were part of their biology, while swarms of fighter-sized creatures launched themselves at the approaching fleet. Captain Steve Rogers, now commanding the heavy cruiser UES Defiance, led the first wave of attacks against the orbital stations. His ship's crew had become experts at the chaotic fighting style that confused swarm collective intelligence. All ships scatter formation, Jackson ordered. Remember, they expect us to fight like a proper fleet. Don't give them that satisfaction. The human ships broke away from their Valari partners and began attacking in seemingly random patterns. Some charged directly at the strongest defenses. Others flanked around to hit weak points, and a few simply spun in place while firing in all directions. To any military observer, it would have looked like complete chaos. But it worked. The swarms, collective mind, designed to counter organized military tactics, struggled to respond to the unpredictable human assault. Every time it adapted to one ship's behavior, that ship would completely change its approach. Meanwhile, Admiral Morrison led a smaller force toward the planet's surface. His mission was the most dangerous of all: penetrate the planetary defenses and destroy the central command organisms that controlled the entire hive world. Sensors are picking up massive bioelectrical activity from the planet's core, reported Commander Lisa Parker, Morrison's science officer. Whatever's down there, it's big enough to coordinate 10 million individual creatures. The strike force included the stealth ship UES Ghost, commanded by Morrison himself, along with 6 smaller vessels crewed by the best pilots in both fleets. They would have to navigate through the planet's living atmosphere while avoiding defenses that could adapt to their presence. Entering the upper atmosphere now, Morrison reported. It's like flying through the inside of a lung. The planet's atmosphere was thick with organic matter, living clouds that responded to the ship's presence by trying to engulf them. Acid rain fell upward in some areas, while others were filled with electrical storms generated by the planet's nervous system. Lieutenant Sam Mitchell, piloting one of the escort ships, found himself flying through what appeared to be a blood vessel the size of a subway tunnel. "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen," he reported. "The walls are contracting like they're trying to digest us." On the ground, Colonel Hughes was leading the largest Marine assault in human history. 30,000 Marines in power armor dropped from orbit in waves, landing in the middle of terrain that actively tried to kill them. Sergeant Kelly Foster found herself fighting on a surface that was part plant, part machine, and part animal. The ground beneath her feet pulsed with a heartbeat. and weapons grew out of the soil to fire at her squad. "These things aren't just defended," she reported to Hughes. "The whole planet is one big weapon." Master Chief Tony Rivera had been assigned to the most dangerous mission of all, leading a small team to the planet's core to plant the nuclear charges that would destroy the central command organism. They had to fight their way through tunnels that were actually arteries in a creature larger than most moons. "The bio-readings are off the charts," reported Dr. Campbell from orbit. "That command organism isn't just controlling the swarm. It is the swarm. Every creature on that planet is just an extension of its body." The breakthrough came when Rivera's team reached the central chamber. What they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. A creature the size of a building, connected to the planet through thousands of organic cables, its massive brain visible through translucent skin. "This thing has been alive for thousands of years," Rivera realized. "It's not just the swarm's leader, it's their god." But humans had been killing gods since they learned to make fire. Rivera and his team planted their charges while fighting off waves of defender organisms that emerged from the chamber's walls. The nuclear devices were specially designed by Dr. Campbell to disrupt biological neural networks on a massive scale. "Charges set," Rivera reported. "Everyone get clear." The evacuation was a nightmare of running battles through collapsing tunnels, as the planet's immune system tried to stop them. Marines fought their way back to the surface while orbital bombardment cleared their path. When the charges detonated, the effect was immediate and devastating. The massive command organism died. Instantly, its neural network overloaded by the nuclear pulse. Across the planet, millions of swarm creatures stopped moving as their controlling intelligence vanished. In orbit, the living space stations began to drift aimlessly, their coordination gone. Admiral Jackson's fleet moved in to finish them off, while ground forces secured the planet. The war was over. The aftermath was both triumphant and sobering. Human casualties numbered over 30,000, and 12 ships had been lost in the final battle. But the swarm was finished, their central intelligence destroyed and their remaining forces scattered and leaderless. Ambassador Zeph Lynn arrived at Luna Station 2 weeks after the victory, bringing with her a formal invitation that would change human history forever. "The Galactic Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership," she announced to Admiral Clark and the assembled human leadership. "Your species has proven itself capable of protecting galactic civilization from threats that our most advanced races could not handle." Admiral Quindar, now a close friend and ally, added his own perspective. "We have learned much from fighting alongside humans. Your ability to thrive in impossible conditions, to find opportunity in chaos, and to never surrender even when facing certain death. These are qualities the galaxy needs." Captain Morrison, recently promoted to Admiral, found himself appointed as humanity's first representative to the Galactic Council. As he prepared for his new role, he reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, humanity had been considered primitive by galactic standards. Now they were seen as the galaxy's guardians, the species you called when facing an impossible threat. Dr. Campbell established joint research stations with Valari scientists, combining human adaptability with Valari technology to create defenses against future threats. The partnership between the two species had grown from desperate necessity into genuine friendship and mutual respect.